essentially in one slide, this is what I was hoping to go through, which is taking some stage direction. Okay. The story of having a product company. We were doing cloud CCTV as a product, and learning a little bit about APIs, getting an interest, coming here to Nordic APIs, having this eureka moment, our epiphany, as we call it, and then going home to start an entirely different company based on the idea of being a platform with this similar concept of working with cameras and so on, but to try and open up cameras as a platform to other businesses. And really, what I was thinking of here was this is the message that I wanted to give myself 12 months ago. Could have saved me a lot of time and a lot of money. And I'm hoping that maybe there's somebody in the room or somebody in the audience to whom that might be of some relevance. So forgive me a little bit if it sounds a little bit like my summer holiday story, but I wanted to be kind of specific about what we were doing. Yeah, I found a lot of the API stuff is sometimes quite abstract. So this is really my personal stories, things that happened uniquely to us, which may or may not be that relevant. To just start with a little bit of background, this is the world's first digital camera. 1975. Any thoughts on who might have made it? Yeah, it was a Kodak camera. And Kodak probably best known for slightly missing the wave in the switch from analog to digital, but they've caught up. My story began back in Berlin. I was making time-lapse movies using cameras, learning about the technology, thought this is quite interesting. Got some programmers working on this time-lapse idea, and one of the things that happens when you start working with cameras is you end up fairly quickly in the security industry, because that's really where it's all at. They're called security cameras, and their primary purpose is this live and recorded view around security. And that's another picture that I quite like from Banksy. What that looked like, there's about 120 million cameras out there in the world looking at us. There are about 2.25 billion cameras this year being produced. That's cameras in total, so on the mobile phones, USB cameras, that sort of thing. There's about 200 companies who are making security cameras, and it's very, very fragmented. So the market leader, which is the Swedish company Axis, has about 6% of the security cameras out there. And that's the problem. That's what I was getting into, didn't really appreciate at the time, and it's what caused us a lot of the problems in building our business. So our first product was this security-orientated product. You could either connect your own camera, or we would sell you a camera. We charged on a per-camera basis, depending on how much storage you wanted. And the thing we were really offering was this cloud element to cameras. And we worked with different business models of selling into the telco industry, direct to consumers, or also white labeling through the security industry. It was fine that this is sort of like from 2010 up to, say, 2013. We were doing okay. We were getting cameras connected. We were bringing in some revenue. It was difficult, though. There was suddenly a flood of similar companies coming on to the market. The cost of supporting customers was quite high, and it was really hard to find the sort of expertise necessary to make it really rock solid to support all these consumer applications. At one point, we made a spreadsheet of all our customers and sort of broke down who the ones that were really working for us, and we found this curious pattern where all of our best customers were all Scandinavian. They were either in Scandinavia or they were Scandinavians living abroad. And these just happened to be the people who, they had good cameras, they had good internet connections, they were able to solve some of those like teething problems of port forwarding and so on, and they didn't mind paying us the annual fee up front. And so we seriously considered renaming our company to Scando TV and just selling to Scandinavian people. So I already had a very positive disposition towards this part of the world before coming over here. So we're selling the security product, and I started to get inquiries for our API from some sort of significant companies who weren't looking at it now anymore as a security product, but they were thinking, hang on a minute, these live images, they could augment our products if we could integrate it in a nice way. So in that sort of entrepreneurial fashion, I said, yes, we have an API, and I turned to Google and tried to find out what an API was, and that led me basically to coming here to the Nordic APIs 2013, just over 12 months ago, and starting to meet some of the people here. And it was that moment of feeling accepted, I think, at the first evening where we were there in the Smart Bear offices, and tucking into some of the crisps, and somebody said, so what do you do? And I just tried out the sentence for the first time. I said, we make APIs for cameras. And they said, oh, that's great. It's brilliant. It's just what I needed for my last project, whatever. And for that 3-day period, I had a sequence of these experiences where people understood the concept of what we were trying to do, and there was a lot of affirmation. And basically, that's what led me running home without my towel to tell everybody that we were starting a new business. And at the time, it felt very, very revolutionary, what I wanted to change in the company. And this is, I think, the key to the point of this talk. For starters, a different business model. So rather than selling this sort of per camera security, we were now going to get into charging for APIs and look at the various different API business models, it seemed. We were going for a totally different type of customer. This wasn't somebody anymore who was watching their shop or their back garden. We were trying to sell into software developers. I knew that I had managed to get away with being the CTO until that point, the sort of the major technical lead in the business. But I felt very strongly that if we were now going to be selling to other software developers, that given that I can't write code, I would be found out too quickly. And I needed a strong heavyweight on the team who was more aligned with that. And that led me really to reconsidering our whole technology stack. I basically had a remote team working with us in Pakistan. We were building on the Microsoft platform. I felt we had to reconsider that whole choice. That it seemed like the momentum behind APIs was more in the open source community. And so hence, basically finding a new development team. Those last 3 points were for me also largely justified around creating the right culture in the company that was now necessary. And that, as you can imagine, equated to a lot of money and a big change. The title of this talk was Minimum Viable Product. I think it probably could have been recalled Maximum Viable Product in terms of the approach we took to it. To explain just quickly, Evercam, so a single API to talk to all these different types of cameras, and the problems that we had faced as Canva TV, I now wanted to address them for other developers so they could build on our knowledge. We were trying to be this marketplace where software developers could reach their audience, the camera owners, and camera manufacturers would be an important partner for us to do something analogous to what happened to phones. Phones that it was make a phone call, send a text message, and now they've become these multifunction devices. We saw the potential to do something similar with cameras, which at a technical level are actually quite similar to phones. So the first thing that came out of it was, our Swagger API. And this feeling, okay, great, that's the thing that I went to Stockholm to learn about. And that allowed the first generation of things that we wanted to build. So this is an example of one of our customers where they're just grabbing images in as a vehicle arrives, and as a vehicle leaves, it's an extra sort of verification of an event. And we have a whole series of use cases along those lines. With cameras as well, we had to go slightly beyond just API as our thing that faced the customer and build what we were calling widgets. So the client-side code, quite a lot of client-side code to deal with all the complexities there of dealing with Android and web browsers and so on, which still the standardization for video is rough. So there was a lot of that. It's used here, for example, in SAP. So they've got live camera views built into their dashboards using our technology. That's the sort of place you find it. Obviously, authentication and OAuth. In my first conversation with Kin Lane, I described what we did as cameras plus OAuth. That was a really significant problem that we had to get our heads around. So it's this idea where a third-party developer can build something, log in, retrieve a list of cameras, and in this case, it's sending you an email at a specific date and time. Turned out to be kind of a popular application. Other curious applications we got involved in. This one was about a year or so ago. There was a horse meat scandal where horse meat was turning up in hamburgers. The retailers were getting upset about that. Everyone was getting upset about that. And we got involved with the task of being able to, for any particular hamburger, basically be able to trace its whole life back to when it had 4 legs in a field using cameras. Kind of one of the moments where I questioned what we were getting into at all. There was more fun stuff. One of the really nice things about essentially kind of moving out of the security world and into this developer platform world is I suddenly felt we were kind of cool again, and we could go to TechCrunch Disrupt and we could talk to the VCs, and I've spent a bit of time, some really, really good weeks in San Francisco in the last year, which was a refreshing change from all those sort of motorway petrol station meetings where we were talking more about the security industry. And this is sort of where things started getting interesting from my point of view. It became obvious that the people connecting their cameras to our system, they needed some way then ultimately of kind of looking at the cameras. It just kind of seemed to make sense, and we found ourselves building the dashboard to view your cameras. Seems natural enough, but it was basically the same thing that we had had previously, and I was kind of replicating it, which I hadn't really considered, that would still be important. Yes, so, right. Here are our Swagger documentation. In the meantime, when I had said all this momentum was behind sort of open source, and this is what it looked like we wanted to go, the road we wanted to go down. With our old platform, Microsoft did their thing and sort of caught up a little bit with the API momentum. They released beautiful self-documenting tools. So our old platform suddenly had a really nice API, and it was kind of catching up. Nonetheless, Evercam took shape. We were able to sign up customers. We had this concept of charging on a usage basis, which actually in the end, as we shaped up the product, started to look more and more and more like Canva TV, because we were really charging on a per camera basis, even though our story and our messaging was quite different. So when I put the two now side by side, as a business, they're actually very similar. And the underlying technologies were very, very similar, are very, very similar. One where we had the security product, the other being a developer platform, but basically people pay, they connect their camera, and then they do stuff. And in both cases, there's a dashboard and the possibility of an API. The key things that I think we learned, and this is again all very sort of subjective, and I don't see these in any way as absolute rules for people. But in terms of OAuth, Travis very kindly followed up with me, and sort of I think that the few weeks after I'd left here in Stockholm, said, "Marco, listen, do you want a hand with that OAuth stuff?" And I said to my new CTO, "Listen, do you think we need any help with that OAuth stuff?" And he was like, "It's fine, I got it, I got the book, it's okay." That was a really serious mistake, and we had no idea how many varieties you can, how many different roads you can go down on that. And I would advise anyone to get professional help on that, and I think Travis is one of the best people out there on that. I was pushing very heavily initially to use one of the API management platforms. The idea appealed to me that somebody else has done all of this work. It's solving all the problems we need to solve in terms of rate limiting and billing and so on and so on. And I had a CTO who was still finding his feet with that territory, and he was coming much more from the wanting to build everything from the ground up. It's one of the things we had a bit of sort of initial conflict over. In the end, from a technical point of view, I think I'm undecided. I've come round to really his way of thinking, that it made sense for us, in our case, to solve a lot of the problems ourselves. But one thing we definitely really got, we worked with 3Scale in the end, and aside from the platform they gave us, they were really fantastic in understanding the type of business we were trying to build and helping us there with marketing support and positioning and so on, and introducing us to other people. So that was really significant and kind of unexpected. So I feel like what we were paying for, the value was actually coming for something very different. the whole Microsoft versus open source question, I would be very much now of a like whatever point of view. I didn't know that at the time. Again, culturally it felt like we had to go the other direction, but Microsoft did their thing of catching up. Another thing that was really clear for us in trying to be a platform, and I learned this again and again, and particularly where I got to speak to people more in America really who had more experience of this industry, is the idea of providing an API or a platform and that people will come and build on it. Even the really successful companies, the Twilios of the world, it wasn't like that, and that they had to rely on a much more traditional model of going out to find the big customers, build code for those big customers to allow them to use your API. And that's very much our experience as well. It's easy in this sort of an environment to believe that the API is the end of the story. And just from a business point of view, it was only the beginning of the story. We faffed around a lot with the subject of documentation and how to do it. And I think my summary on that is there is no easy way. Swagger is the road we went down. But in any case, you have to do that really well and customize it yourself. The expression throwing out the baby with the bathwater, I had a team and I had myself gathered quite a lot of knowledge about the world of cameras and came across this API subject where we were totally naive and fresh. And I overestimated really the size of that problem and underestimated the value of what we already knew. And so both not getting enough value out of our existing developer team, who were able to actually catch up with the whole API story quite quickly, and underestimating our own knowledge of cameras was a mistake. And really, I think the final thing is that the business, the idea of having an API company and selling your product as an API, it looks a hell of a lot like the product we used to have, arguably with a different customer, but the more that we had to get to our customer's customer, so not the software developer, but the guy who's actually in charge of these use cases, the more it felt very similar to the business that I had pre-Stockholm 2013. And that was a big learning, and that was hard to see for us back then. Yeah, so in summary, I'm very grateful to the community here and to Nordic APIs for what we've done. I think we made. I'm delighted with the sort of end result of our journey, and if anyone thinks that I can save them some time on the road or let them avoid a few obstacles, I'm delighted to talk about that. And thank you very much.